The Burning Truth with Casey Hendrickson.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in to The Burning Truth. I am your host, Casey Hendrickson. I kind of teased that I had somebody special for you guys coming up today, and joining us on the line right now, renowned filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh, how are you doing this afternoon?
Hey, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for the time. We really do appreciate it, and really got a new film out, and I wanted to have you on to really talk about it, because I think that your movies are very different than what we typically see with political documentaries, in that usually a political documentary has a bunch of people coming out with counterpoints, counterfacts, picking it apart, saying it's wrong, being able to fact check that movie. You get a lot of people, Dinesh, that say that you're not telling the truth, but I never really see anybody give any evidence pointing to where you got things wrong. And that's become kind of a theme where you always challenge them for that, and they never actually produce any of that.
That's right. I think the reason the films are so powerful is because I use the same elements of what makes a feature film successful for the documentary films. So a good feature film, of course, will have character, it will have plot, it will have suspense, narrative, climax, an emotional underpinning with a musical score. So we put all those elements into the films so that the films are very engaging, entertaining, and in the end informative and inspirational as well. And this film is no exception. It tells the story of Trump and also of the people who are trying to undermine Trump to get him. I talk about character assassination, political assassination, lawfare or legal assassination, and then, of course, the two actual assassination attempts.
Now, of course, we're talking about Dinesh D'Souza's brand new film, Vindicating Trump, which, of course, you can get tickets to and learn more about at vindicatingtrump.com. So, Dinesh, what made you sit down and say this was the next movie? Obviously, you make political documentaries on the regular, but why this film and why now?
Trump is an extremely interesting figure, a larger-than-life figure. I've never seen a figure in political life where you've got one group of people who will take a bullet for him and another group of people who will actually cheer, maybe silently cheer, when somebody else tries to put a bullet in him. You have to go back to Abraham Lincoln to find a figure who inspired or provoked such radically opposite reactions. And even with Lincoln, the division was not over Lincoln the man, it was over slavery, it was over the issues. But with Trump, it is over the man. So you've got this remarkable figure. The centerpiece of this film, by the way, is a very interesting and eye-popping one-on-one conversation with Trump, in which I spring questions on him very different than the ones he normally gets. And it gives you a real window into into his soul, into the tumblers of his mind working, and some aspects of Trump that he normally does not like to exhibit in public.
Yeah, a lot of his private life has been just that, very private. And I'm originally from Las Vegas. Of course, he was there quite a bit. And, we saw Trump, the guy, the same guy that you see now, but still his family life. He's always protected his children, especially when they were young. We've seen that. And he's always made sure that his private life was protected. And it's a little bit more difficult to do nowadays with his political life. But so do you have any teasers on some of the questions that you asked him that might be a little bit different than what we typically see with a political interview?
So here's a type of a typical question I ask him. I say, look, they say that you called for an insurrection on January 6th. And as far as I can see, you didn't do that. You didn't tell people to go inside the Capitol. You didn't tell them to take over the place. You didn't tell them to stop the count. However, I say, guess what? Had you called for an insurrection, there would have been one, and I mean a real one. Mm-hmm. And there would be one if you called for one now. So what is it like to have that kind of singular power? The point I was getting at, by the way, with Trump is nobody else could actually call for an insurrection and pull it off. If any other political figure, including Kamala Harris, Biden, anyone in the Republican side said, hey, let's show up for an insurrection at 6 p.m., nobody would come. So Trump, in that sense, has that kind of magnitude. He has that kind of power. And it's interesting to see how he reacts to that type of a question. So that's just a small example. I think another point I'd like to make is that Trump shows certain qualities in public, and sometimes qualities that people object to. Oh, he's very egotistical, or he's a bully. Well, Trump is an 800-pound gorilla, and he will bully other bullies. But you'll never see Trump bully a doorman in one of his hotels. He'll never bully a waiter. Recently when Tim Walz was out in public, some Trumpster shouted something at him, and Walz gave him the middle finger.
He flipped him off.
Trump will never do that. Yeah. So Trump, in his personal dimension, is not egotistical. He's self-deprecating. He's very gentle. He shows a lot of curiosity about other people. If he sees his own employees, he knows that this guy's kid just finished his exam. He asks about that guy. So these are not the qualities of an egotist or a narcissist.
Yeah, that's one of the things that people who've worked for Donald Trump, whether they supported him politically or not, have always said about him. Is he always made time to communicate with his employees and to ask them about their families as well. So again, the movie is Vindicating Trump. You can get tickets at vindicatingtrump.com. It is in theaters. So you can actually go to a movie theater and watch this. You can also buy the DVD and the Blu-ray and everything else at vindicatingtrump.com. So what are some of the issues that you tackled with some of the other stuff in Vindicating Trump? Some of the things maybe about electioneering. And I'd like that you went back in time and were playing these old clips of Donald Trump, because I did this a lot back in 2016. A lot of people who didn't know who he was. They didn't know that he was basically saying the same things in 2016 that he'd been saying for 10, 15 years. So I like how you did that. But what were some of the other things that you addressed in the film?
Well, the film has a very interesting interview with Laura Trump, and I picked her because, she is in the Trump family, so she sees Trump up close, but she's also an in-law, so she has, you could call it in-law objectivity. The other thing is she's also the vice chair of the Republican National Committee. One of the interesting segments of the film deals with election fraud, and deals with a form of election fraud that most people have never heard about. The section is called the ballot makers, and believe it or not, we expose in the film that there is a deep vulnerability in our system, namely that you or I can purchase and make thousands of ballots. Now, this seems crazy because we always think, I get ballots from the state. I live in Texas. I'm going to get the state of Texas to send me an absentee ballot. But where does the state of Texas get ballots from? The answer is they order ballot stock from a handful of printing companies, and you and I can go buy ballot stock from those companies and make thousands, maybe tens of thousands of ballots. So all of this is exposed in the movie. I raise it with Trump. I raise it with Laura Trump. So as with my other movies, this movie is packed with new insights, but also with new information on the very important and urgent issue of election fraud.
Now, I suppose that there would be some people who watch your movie Vindicating Trump, Dinesh, and they would go, okay, we're still doing this thing again. I've heard this from Republicans. Stop talking about the election being stolen. Stop talking about all of that stuff. Why continue to push that issue heading into 2024 when so many people, including some of his supporters, feel like that might be an anchor around his neck and may not actually help him? Why continue to pursue that?
Well, I think it is very important to say that this is not the stuff that I covered in 2,000 Mules. In 2,000 Mules in 2022, I was looking back at what happened in 2020. And even in that movie, I was very clear to say, listen, the only reason I'm looking in the rearview mirror is so this stuff doesn't happen again. Now, in the new movie, I'm doing something totally different. I'm basically saying, all right, let me put myself in the mind of the criminals. If I were to break into Fort Knox, how would I do it? Is there a vulnerability in our election system that hasn't been discovered, hasn't been exposed? So who can possibly say that that's not a good thing to do? It's kind of like saying if you suspect that banks are being robbed, and I tell you, all right, I'm now telling you that I've discovered that at all the banks in the country, they leave the back door open on Saturday from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. You're like, why are you talking about election? Why are you talking about robbing banks? This is obviously, the integrity of our election system is obviously vitally important. I'm not saying that anyone has done this type of a fraud. I'm actually trying to blow the whistle in advance to make it impossible for any kind of a heist to occur in 2024. So unless you think that the issue itself is not important or insignificant, there's nothing wrong with looking ahead and putting out some warning signs. Again, it's not about looking back at 2020. It's about looking forward to the upcoming election.
Yeah, I think most people would be very surprised that you can actually print your own ballots, especially since we have ballots going out in some states that don't have the markers that are supposed to have and things like that, even in this election right now. And having that information out there, considering even Democrats for many years, Dinesh, have talked about being able to hack into voting machines and change the vote. And they were very worried about Michigan heading into 2016 and the letter from the Democrats over there. So this is something that should be bipartisan, but of course it hasn't been, simply because of who won that election in 2016. What were some of the other big surprising finds as you started diving into this in your movie Vindicating Trump?
I think because the controversy over Trump is over the man, the movie highlights, people, I've heard endlessly now for years about sort of Trump's vices. He's a playboy, he's an egotist, he's a bully, he's this and he's that. Very rarely do people talk about Trump's virtues. And I want to highlight the virtue of courage, because the philosopher Aristotle says that is the highest of all the virtues, in part because it gives you kind of the strength to carry out the other virtues. And look at Trump's reaction to the two assassination attempts. I mean, let's focus for a moment on the second one, because first of all, Trump is annoyed that he's being pulled off the golf course when he's about to make an amazing shot. I mean, that's crazy. I don't know anybody else who would react that way. He goes on social media and he posts 0 for 2. We all know about his reaction to the first assassination attempt. And it's beyond that. If you even look at the criminal charges, any other Republican facing 3 criminal charges would have exited the race, fled the field, be never heard from again.
Yeah.
But the way that Trump not only endures but forges ahead, I think gives him a sort of sublime bravery that puts him in a class of his own. I don't know, again, anyone else, not just today, but even in the landscape of American history, who has this kind of fortitude and tenacity.
Yeah, I think he surprised all of us. I think we go back to that debate, and when Megyn Kelly had her exchange with him, I think a lot of us, myself included, were like, oh gosh, I've never seen anybody come back from that. I think he's done. And some people said, nope, he's not. And sure enough, I mean, he hasn't gone anywhere. And we've never seen anything like that. Do you think that's why? Just that he won't go away, he won't give in, he won't surrender. Do you think that the history and the tradition of the American spirit of just liking the underdog, liking somebody who's a fighter and a winner, is really what pulls people to Donald Trump?
I think yes, and I would add, and this is something I would say both of Trump and J.D. Vance, and Vance showed it in the recent vice presidential debate, they are very authentic. I mean, Trump is so authentic that if you look at a Trump tweet, you look at a social media post by Trump, you can tell it's him. If somebody else did it, the Trumpsters would detect it immediately. Trump has a unique voice. He has a unique style. He loves to use bold and all caps and multiple exclamation points. So you can tell that that's Trump's own distinctive voice. And J.D. Vance, too, is an American original of that sort. And I think by contrast, both Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are trying their best to appear likable and folksy and relatable, but it's all a performance. And I think the American people are smart enough to tell the difference between a performance, a theatrical show, and the real thing.
You mean like Mr. Jazz Hands, Mr. Walz? The jazz hand thing?
Exactly. I mean, he I don't know if you saw that little social media clip. He sees a mascot on the field.
Yeah.
His reaction is so over the top. Victory signs, hugs the guy, hugs himself. It's just so ridiculous and unbecoming of a 60-year-old to respond in that way that you're like, that's fake.
Yeah, clearly it is. Again, we're talking with Dinesh D'Souza, renowned filmmaker, and his new movie, Vindicating Trump, which you can go to vindicatingtrump.com. You can get tickets for it. You can also buy the movie and also find a movie theater showing it near you. Every time you have an endeavor, I would assume, especially when you're doing a documentary, Dinesh, and you're starting to uncover things in the story, there's usually something that catches you off guard, is a big surprise you weren't expecting. Can you tell us what one of those big moments was for you when you were making Vindicating Trump?
The biggest surprise for me was this. As I got ready to talk to Trump, it was a one-on-one for 45 minutes. My wife told me something that anyone could have said to me, which is, Dinesh, you'll be lucky if you get in 3 questions. Trump is like a runaway train. He's going to be off and running, and so, you're not going to be able to, quote, interview him in any meaningful sense of the term. And I go, no. I need to kind of control the trajectory of the interview. I'm going to ask Trump about young Lincoln and his Lyceum speech and the threat of dictatorship that Lincoln prophesied. I want people to see Trump process this information and respond to it. And it's not stuff that he gets normally in typical interviews that he does. I'm happy to say that Trump let me do that. You can see him sitting back, listening, digesting information, making sense of it, and responding. So it's a very unique type of conversation, and it's the centerpiece of the film. There's a lot else in the film. There are entertaining and very cinematic I make these movies for the theater, so you'll be able to watch it later if you want by streaming or DVD, but watching it in the theater with like-minded people is a whole different experience. So it's going to be in the theaters another week or so. See it if you can this weekend, or if not, the coming week, and vindicatingtrump.com is where you get tickets.
All right, any last-minute nuggets for anybody out there who might be considering going to watch the movie Vindicating Trump?
Let's just say that this is, some people have called my films docudramas because they're not normal documentaries. It's not interviews with a little bit of stock footage. This is a full-scale movie, and it's quite common in my films at the end of the film for the entire theater to stand up and burst into applause. And you know that that's rare in a movie theater, but it happens all the time. So enjoy it, share it. If you have a Democrat, buy them a ticket and yank them along. You'll be glad you did.
Yeah, and I personally experienced that. I was just telling Dinesh before the interview that way back when his film about Obama came out, I took a bunch of listeners to that, and it was a standing ovation at the end of the movie. Fantastic stuff. You've always put out very, very good films. It's always easy to recommend them to people. I wish you the best of success with Vindicating Trump, Dinesh, and of course, go to vindicatingtrump.com. You can buy the movie there, get tickets there, find a movie theater near you that is playing it. Definitely go see it at the movie theater and then pick up a copy for yourself. You do have the holidays coming up, too, so this would make a great stocking stuffer for your leftist cousin when you go visit over the holidays.
Absolutely. And if I can say, there's also a book of the same title, and that's coming out in a few days, and you can get that on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or right off the movie website.
Perfect. Go to vindicatingtrump.com. Dinesh D'Souza, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We really do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. And again, I want to thank Dinesh for joining the program today. We went long, obviously, so we'll have a quick turnaround when we get back on the other side of the commercial break, but more coming up on The Burning Truth.
Podcasts by Federated Media.